Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, co-founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, you name it, across the world. And today I have somebody from across the world from me in crypto and blockchain. Today I have an amazing guest. He's the co-founder of Haven1. His name is Jeff Owens. Jeff, welcome.
Thanks, Jamil. Nice to meet you, and thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome. Honor's all mine. So let's kick things off. And the first question is what is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
So I've been in blockchain since 2015. Prior to that, engineering and product roles, primarily in the startup space, from low startups that have scaled and sold to high growth startups in the States, and then all the way over to Thailand, where I was leading product for Agoda as well, managing about 85 to 85 people. There I was managing things like fraud, Agoda Homes, which is basically their version of Airbnb, building the products, making sure that we're reducing the fraud on the platform from a consumer side and a supplier side. Yeah, as I mentioned, I got into crypto about now, man, it's like 8 years. Most recently, I was the founder of a company called Coinbag, which was basically a digital asset management tool that helped Web3 businesses and individuals de-risk their assets by connecting to multiple wallets, all from a single platform. So full self-custodial wallets. Coinbag never managed the keys. Allowed you to do like process controls. So if you had, let's say, transfers over X amount of dollars as a business, you want to have multiple people signing on that wallet or on that private key, you can do that through Coinbag. And then we can also do things like rebalancing across these wallets. So you're constantly distributing your risk in the event that there is some sort of hack or breach of one of your wallets, which unfortunately happens all too often. So yeah, that kind of led me into my journey with Haven1, where we co-founded that company because a lot of the problems that we saw with our clients at Coinbag.
Awesome. So Haven1, I know I interviewed a guest last year, I think, with Haven1 and the co-founder. But I want to find out again, what is Haven1 all about, including your unique vision?
Yeah, so Haven1 kind of stems from the problem of all of the hacks and scams and rug pulls that have occurred. I mean, this year alone, there's already been over 100 million in hacks that have occurred in 2024. This is off the back of about 2 billion that happened in 2023. So we see that hacks and scams are becoming more and more apparent in the space. And so really what Haven1's mission is to try to bring more accountability to the developers who are given these very robust financial tools, which are smart contracts, with very little typically little fiduciary responsibility or background. And so we want to bring some accountability to the space, mandate audits, bring on things like recourse and clawback mechanisms, which is something that will really hopefully help bring on or bridge the next phase of traditional finance money into Web3. And then also things like identity verification, yet anonymized on-chain, which creates unique use cases for developers that are looking to use these proof of identity frameworks to build new applications that target new users on-chain. So that's, I guess, in a nutshell, what Haven1 is. It's an EVM-compatible layer 1 blockchain, proof of authority. So we'll have 7 trusted validators to start. And we're working with the likes of like Aberdeen Asset Management, Pi Securities in Thailand, which is one of the largest asset managers in Thailand, Litecoin Foundation, and we just recently have been signing with Fireblocks to secure our bridge and hopefully get into a more strategic partnership with them as well.
I have a couple follow-ups there, but I'll ask them after. I want to find out about you had a recent news release, right? You had a launch of a test net, right? Correct. How's that so far, and what should we look forward to as a result of that?
So the testnet's been great so far. So we launched on December 15th, and we have about 30,000 users that have joined our wait list to join the testnets, and we've been slowly allowing users to join, roughly 1,000 every 3 days. We'll be ramping that up over time. And we just recently actually passed our 1 millionth block minted on the blockchain, so that's an exciting technical milestone. And about 135,000 transactions in total on the testnet. So it is an incentivized testnet where we're getting users to go and play around with the different features on Haven1, give us feedback, and as a reward, there will be incentives that they can earn.
Very cool. So one of my first follow-ups is you said proof of authenticity, right? How's that different from
authority?
Proof of stake? How's that different?
Yeah. So proof of authority is what it
Or
is, and really the main difference is that proof of stake requires multiple stakers or validators that provide stake into the network. The difference with proof of authority versus proof of stake is that proof of authority has actually trusted, reputable validators on the network that are chosen by us, and so they're putting their brand and their reputation behind it. And what this does is it allows for faster consensus and allows for faster throughput on the transactions. But it also creates more legitimacy and allows them to participate in governance of the network so we can move quick and make faster decisions that are better for the entire network.
got it. Okay. And then um you said an interesting word there that I want to figure out where to put it, in our conversation. And I think I'm gonna ask it a little later. Actually, no, you know what?
Okay.
You said clawbacks, right? So all these bankrupt CFI exchanges are looking to pay back investors. And part of that payback process is a very manual clawback process that they're hoping people give the money back. Now,
Mhm.
are you building that? Should that be built in chain? And if it does, how would that help to transition some of these C5 projects that where they're doing clawbacks now? How would that help the whole entire process?
Yeah, so it starts with a couple layers of automation because you can't have everything be completely manual. There always will be some level of manual aspect to dispute resolution and clawbacks, but there's two ways in which Haven1 solving this in a unique way. The first is by on-chain anomaly detection. And so we're working with our audit partners to be constantly monitoring the network and looking for, I guess, odd activity that occurs on chain. When that does occur, if funds try to move off the chain through the bridges, the secure bridges, which is powered by Fireblocks, then they will be frozen for review. And the idea there is it's always when you're building models on this, it's precision versus recourse. You want to make sure that you're allowing the 99.99% of good actors to be able to transact very freely, but you're still catching that 0.1%. And so this is a balancing act. And so it is something that we have models on, and we'll be adding multiple models beyond just the Haven1. As I mentioned, we'll work with our audit partners to be having these in place. But then there is the aspect of actually needing to review those transactions, and this is where the validators can come in and or governance itself. So the actual Haven1 association can do some level of review on these. The idea is that we want to process any sort of clawbacks as quickly as possible, and all it is it's a re-transfer back to the originator of those funds. So it's not actually taking the private key and pulling the money back, but it's just reallocating it back to the user. So that's the first way. The second way is actually just manual dispute resolution. So think of it when you're like freezing a credit card. You can do that on chain with your wallet, and so you'll be able to freeze any assets if you determine that there is something suspicious that occurs. So we'll freeze your wallet, and then it'll freeze any of the smart contracts that you've recently interacted with. And so one of the ideas that we want to solve here is we don't want to have to take down the entire blockchain to review all these transactions. You just want to freeze the actual smart contracts. That's been a big issue that's occurred. Is you don't. This is once again going to that precision versus recall. You don't want to affect everybody in the network because of an isolated incident that occurs. And so this is something that we're working on. And then there's the third layer of defense, which is through the provable identity framework. And the way that you can actually, like the last line of defense is really legal arbitration. And that's something that we want to avoid. But the only way that you can do legal arbitration on chain or hold people accountable is by knowing who you're interacting with on chain. And so this is where Haven1 will require every single person that's going through the network, whether it be a builder, a user or investor, or the validator, they all need to go through off-chain identity verification. They'll have an on-chain identity NFT, soulbound NFT that's minted for them with anonymized pieces of their data. In the event that there is a issue on-chain, we can go back to the compliance partners who have that user data, and then there can be arbitration that occurs. So it's really like, if you want to think of it this way, like in crypto today, most of the on-chain activity, it's completely anonymous. And so all we're doing is we're remove that anonymity from the process, which means that people that are hackers in the space should hopefully realize that, if they're going to try to hack something, they're basically going into a bank or going to this with their ID shown up to the camera. The likelihood of them actually going and hacking a system where they know that they've been doxxed is very, very low. And so it's a lot of deterrence and actions within the fraud space as well.
So let me see if I understand this correctly, because if I do, it's really interesting what you're doing. Um, with the centralized exchanges, they did a thorough KYC, right?
Right.
With the pure DeFi exchanges, there is no KYC. There's like this gray area in between the two, right? So what you're
Yep.
saying is you that gap between the KYC for that CeFi used to do and the KYC that DeFi has never done.
Exactly. And you still benefit from all the self-custody, complete control of your funds, the on-chain transparency, instant settlements. So you still benefit from the blockchain, and you know that your funds are segregated and isolated to your specific wallets. But at the same time, that wallet will have identity associated to it, albeit anonymized on-chain.
Good work. Good job. That's yeah. Wow. Cool. That helps a lot of people.
Yeah,
So
that's the plan.
yeah. So I want to find out the state of the current state because it keeps changing. To me, when I look at it, it keeps changing. Right, the current state of the global DeFi space, and what are your thoughts about the possibility of maybe DeFi Summer 2.0 this year?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. So I mean, I talked about this a little bit earlier, but the way that we look at Haven in general, and in being a chain that really enhances decentralized finance, or what we call on-chain finance, we see that this absolutely is coming back, specifically around real world assets and tokenization of real world assets, and not typically in the form of, at least in my opinion, I don't think real estate is going to be the first use case because the operational complexities is very high on this. But I do see the tokenization of things like stocks, bonds, and ETFs coming down the pipeline, especially as more regulators outside of the US are becoming more friendly with the traditional brokerage licenses that they have. So being able to service their use that license to service their crypto communities. So I do absolutely see a DeFi Summer 2.0 coming back. I do think it's going to look a lot different than what the original DeFi Summer looked like. And the thing that scares me the most, though, right now, is that the hacks and everything that are occurring in the space are just going through the roof. So I won't repeat the numbers that I said before, but we at Haven look at if we want the space to grow, you cannot have the barrier to entry be that you need to lose money. And that's how it is today, typically. In order for people to really get into this space and understand DeFi, that is just the way that it is. You need to go in and you need to lose money. And then half the people are going to leave. The other half are going to dig in and try and figure out and be like, oh, this is cool. I messed up. That shouldn't be the case. Like, people cannot lose money in order to adopt a new ecosystem. And so I do think you will see a big push around a lot of traditional players coming in that take on a lot of the risk and take off the risk from the users. And this is in that real world asset tokenization bucket. So we should see a lot more custodians coming in, a lot more people that are offering crypto services in DeFi. And they're the ones that are actually deploying the capital on behalf of the users on DeFi 2.0. So yeah, I do absolutely, as I mentioned, see it coming through. But we really hope that this whole idea of losing money in order to gain momentum is just going to go out the wayside.
I would love that. I've lost money every year, and I've been here since 2017. So I would love to not have to learn things the hard way.
Yeah.
So part of my next question was, why is there a need now more than ever to have security features in the DeFi space? But you said, about hacks and scams and rug pulls. How do you prevent them at the highest level? How do you stop a rug pull, or how do you stop a hack before it begins?
So this is the accountability part that is super important. So accountability, as it stands today, usually comes in the form of audits. But who actually maintains or mandates that the audits are updated consistently? Like, I have an engineering background. Typically, the way engineering works is you make a small tweak. You release something, you do a small tweak on it, you release it again, and you think, oh, well, there's no way that this actually has a bug in it. I only touched it over here in this small little area. But that's not really how smart contracts nor code work. You typically, when you move something breaks in another area. And this is how the exploits happen. So oftentimes, as I mentioned, audits happen at the moment of deployment, and then a company will showcase that their smart contracts have been audited, yet nobody holds them accountable to get those contracts re-audited every single time they deploy that smart contract. And so as a result, you can deploy smart contracts very easily in the DeFi and decentralized ecosystems. And then this is how these exploits happen. And you have the smart contract hacks, which are huge part to most of the hacks that occur and the rug pulls that occur. So I think really bringing that accountability on the smart contract audit side is number one. Number two is the identity verification aspect. So rug pulls are oftentimes companies coming in, deploying something, drawing up a bunch of hype, and then running away with the token. If your identity is associated to that project, you're going to be much more accountable to the success of that project. And not everything's going to be successful, but we really want to avoid these like really quick pump and dump schemes that are occurring within crypto. And a lot of that actually, unfortunately, needs to come into the identity verification, which I know is a sensitive topic to a lot of people, including myself, that are really the quote unquote degens of the ecosystem that want to live in the Wild West.
I used to want to live in the Wild West. Now I want to live in the Wild East.
Exactly.
You said the magic word though. You said identity, right? So I know what's the role of digital identity in DeFi, and then especially in the light of the CFTC focusing heavily on it.
Yeah, so I think it all comes down to the accountability aspect of it, which is that when people have been doxxed, they're going to be much less likely to do something bad. And so this is like an example of this is we talked about earlier, which is you're not going to walk into a bank and put your passport up in front of the camera, right? Like that's essentially what identity verification is doing on chain. Now, the question is, how do you actually execute on something like this? Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to write personal data to the blockchain because it will live there forever. And so that is the antithesis of what decentralization is. And so there's a couple different unique ways you can solve this. And I think we'll see an evolution of this over time. But the first is what we're doing even at Haven, which is creating a soulbound NFT that's associated to the user's wallet address. The actual identity verification is collected off chain. And so we work with compliance partners that are regulated, that have their VASP license, that have their own AML, KYC policies and procedures. They have an entire compliance team. They do the collection of the KYC. And then what they do is they mint this soulbound NFT that's on Haven1 that contains anonymized pieces of data about the user. So it contains country of residence, it contains level of verification completed, contains things like, are they politically exposed, yes or no? These are binary bits that developers can then use to basically ring fence their applications based on what their own local jurisdiction requires without needing to know the exact identity of the person that they're interacting with. And then in the event that something does happen, you do have this off-chain compliance partner where the data is stored in which you can go to that from a regulator standpoint. So I guess the key thing here is that identity verification is absolutely needed in order to bring on the next phase of traditional companies coming in because they need to know the counterparties that they're interacting with. But the question is how do you actually do this in a way that doesn't reveal every single piece about who you are to everybody on chain, because that's what blockchain does. So that's the first way. And the second way is actually working with zero knowledge proofs and trying to build something in which you can actually completely obfuscate this away. And so we're working with a couple partners on this now to start moving down that way. But I think as we've solved it today, doing that anonymized soulbound NFT works just as well.
Yeah, I heard that term a lot, but I don't really know what it is. Soulbound. What is that?
It just means that you can't transfer that NFT out of your wallet. So it lives always associated to that specific wallet address. Because what you don't want to do is you don't want somebody to come in and start sending their identity to somebody else, right? So you want to make sure that this is always associated to this wallet address. So that's just a very simple way to think of soulbound.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
You said that no one's going to see. You said no one's going to go up there and passport in front of a camera, right? But over last summer, people put their eyeballs in front of a camera. And so what's the danger of doing, putting not only your passport, but your eyeballs in front of the camera? What's the ramifications of that, and what do people need to look out for who did?
So in terms of like from a user standpoint, like what are the risks that they take on? Like, so if, I'll I guess put it in a different way. So like, is the question, if I am actually going through identity verification and I have the soulbound entity associated to my identity, what are the risks associated to that?
Yeah.
So I think in general, like especially as we're in an age where like GDPR coming out and all these data privacy policies are becoming very strict. the biggest issue that you have there is that your data somehow gets leaked from the compliance partners. That's going to always be the case, and that'll exist with centralized exchanges. That'll exist with any traditional finance application that you're dealing with. It is a process that I think we've all become well accustomed to, because it's just something that is needed typically to transact in a financial ecosystem. And so, yeah, I guess the biggest risk that you always have is that that gets leaked or exposed, but that's on the compliance partner side, and they'll typically have clawback measures on their own end to handle any sort of data leaks and things like that. So that's, I guess, the biggest risk that you have there. But from the actual blockchain standpoint, because it is anonymized data, there isn't a way for you to actually triangulate who that person is. You have to go to the data source, which is the collector of it.
Got it. So, you talked about the technology ways to decrease rug pulls and losses, right? But say you're a user and you come in fresh and you don't know any better, right? What recommendations could you give to the user to say, hey, watch out for these things, you know? And then talk about your technology where that fits in. But what's the first thing they can do if they're new to crypto and they're might be rug pulled, but you don't know? Like, what's your advice?
If it smells, don't touch it. But no, in all seriousness, I actually really find it hard to recommend people new to crypto to come into DeFi. Just over the years, obviously people need to move in, but the scams and everything in this the knowledge that is needed in order to understand the complexities that go into the smart contracts that you're interacting with is something that I don't think the average consumer can learn or has the time to learn. I mean, this is why in traditional finance we have banks in place, because typically people don't want to manage their own money. And so with crypto, you have these really robust tools to be able, and really technical tools to be able to manage your own funds. But with just one click away, you can lose it all. And so that is something that I think is a very difficult thing or pill to swallow, or something to recommend to people. I guess in terms of the most obvious way that you can protect yourself is through private key management and making sure that you're using cold storage wallets. That's the best advice that I get is just, if you're going to buy crypto, buy it and hold it and put it into cold storage. Now, that's the very extreme side of it. But I do see this is where, going back to the Haven side of things, we can't expect users to be able to actually look at the smart contracts themselves. That's just not physically possible for most people to do. So then the question is, how do you put tools in place for them, which they can actually trust an ecosystem on this, and that they've gone through certain processes? And so that's the hardest part, I think, that exists today, and what we're trying to solve even at the Haven side, which is we are mandating smart contract audits, and then governance actually deploys the smart contracts, not the developer. These are things that then removes the thought process from a user of, oh, has this actually been audited? Do I need to look into the smart contract? You know with 100% certainty that every single smart contract or application that you're existing with has been audited up to date. So those are the types of things that I think need to happen in enforcements that need to happen for really recommending people to go into DeFi and to avoid a lot of these rug pulls, to avoid a lot of these hacks and exploits, because anytime that there's a significant amount of money sitting in a place, it will always be a target. And so the question is do you feel confident enough to put your money in that place? In order to do that, you need to really understand the fundamentals of what's going into that. And I really don't think most people have the time to be able to do that.
It took a long time for me to have the learning curve. I know that. Yeah. So I have a theory, and I might be wrong, but I see a lot of passion and a lot of enthusiasm around artificial intelligence, right? And I think my theory is that we're going to have an AI summer. But along with the AI summer comes possible worse hacks and worse, and more security that has not been addressed yet. How can crypto and maybe DeFi platforms be a barrier for AI theft? To prevent the overreach of using AI.
So this is probably one of my biggest concerns, is that I do see this as something that makes crypto even more susceptible to a lot of these hacks, because where things don't have complete coverage and there is no clawback or recourse mechanisms, there absolutely will be theft. And that's why you see the level of theft happen on chain today, because there is no recourse, there is no clawbacks. When you get that money, you get that money. And there's more and more ways for you to off ramp that money now. It used to be that a lot of these hacks, the funds would be circulated back to the user because they just simply couldn't get the assets off chain. But with peer to peer platforms and everything that's existing, it's becoming much easier to happen. And so I agree. I do see that AI is coming in, and I don't, and it worries me quite a bit about the ability for blockchain to be able to solve any of these things from a security standpoint. And in fact, I think that it's going to be exploited even more than traditional finance.
What do we do?
Well, Haven1. No, in all seriousness, I think, regardless of what is needed, and this doesn't just come from Haven1, we see a lot of other companies out there starting to push for identity verification. We just saw Base, for example, step in and say that they're going to be requiring identity verification. The unfortunate thing is in order for you to be able to claw back funds, you need to know who you're interacting with. And when you know who you're interacting with, that usually comes with identity verification. And so those two things are antithesis. It's the antithesis of what crypto was meant to be. But at the same time, the permanency and all the benefits and beauty of blockchain is something that is being massively exploited now. And so we have to have these mandates in place. You have to have identity verification. If you want to go into the wild east or west or whatever you want to call it, you can still do that, and that will always exist, of course. But you'll know that risk is taking itself on. But when you're moving in, like DeFi and I guess total TVL and DeFi was about 50 billion. At its peak, it was 160 billion. That's nothing in terms of the global equities market that is available for funds to come in. If we really want to actually tap into the other piece of the pie, you have to have a lot of these intermediaries in place, whether it's at a network level, like Haven1 is doing with all these three things, which is mandated smart contract audits, identity verification, and recourse, or if it's at a protocol level, which we're seeing when you want to do real world asset tokenization. If you're looking at OpenEden, you need to go through identity verification with them to prove that you're an accredited investor. All these things are like, if we want to bring on the next phase of adoption, a lot of this is coming to play, and it's going to be a necessity. And that's actually how you start to, it's an unfortunate step in the way, I guess, from a decentralized degen space, but that's how you get, you put these blockers in place that will avoid a lot of these rugs and everything that's happening. And as we talked, like when you're talking AI, it's going to only get worse on chain. So
You said that word a few times, degen. Yeah, there's a lot of gambling tokens. There's a lot. Like, I've seen the decks with, like, the other day with like thousands of gambling tokens I had never heard of before. Right?
yeah.
I'm like, what is this? How do you see that space needs to be regulated or not? How do we make an easier, safer space for people?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be ways around regulation with a lot of these things, and you talk about like the differences between skill-based games and gambling, and so finding that line, and it's very jurisdiction specific. But the moment regulators do want to step into some of these things, and they will eventually if people lose too much funds, because that's usually where regulators will want to immediately step in. They're going to require things like geofencing of your applications. They'll require doxing of the users that are coming into it. So you'll see the exact same things that have happened. I mean, especially like if you look at how the states has enabled gambling and the DraftKings and Fantasy Duel, or I think all these things that are out there now. What is the most important thing that you need to do in order to join those applications? You need to go through identity verification, just like a traditional finance application. And so until these things happen, until people lose a lot of funds, I think regulators will start to then step in, and then we'll see a new space in the gambling side, which I do think is actually a good use case for blockchain. I really do, especially on the skill-based side games. So we've been talking to a couple companies around like building out mahjong games, and it makes a lot of sense. The cool things you can do with tokens to incentivize users from a loyalty standpoint, from a utility standpoint, NFT standpoint. I do see that there is a very unique opportunity there, but it will be an interesting space to watch it in terms of how regulators come in and start to clamp down on a lot of these things.
I played mahjong. Last time I played mahjong was 2004 when I was in China. It was
Oh,
fun.
nice. Okay.
Fun.
Yeah, I've never played myself, but it seems like an interesting game. So I do want to learn.
It is. I didn't really know what I was doing, but it was fun. So, um, I want to. Well, actually, yeah, I want to thank you very much for your time today. I have a couple more questions. One is, first of all, last time I was in Bangkok was 2004, and I loved Koh San Road, which is the backpacker street. I wonder if you had an opportunity to get to be over there at all and enjoy the backpacker area.
Yeah, I have been there. So I've been in Thailand for 7 years. I don't frequent it often, but oftentimes when friends or family come in to visit, they want to go and see it and see the streets and the music, and it's a fun vibe. It's very crazy, but as I mentioned, I don't spend too much time there. But it's about 30 minutes away from where I'm at.
Great, awesome. And then my last, I want to thank you very much for your time today. I love talking to you. This is a great conversation. And it's an easy question: is how can people find out more information about you, about Haven1? How can they become a client? How can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So our testnet, as I mentioned earlier, is live. So you can just navigate over to haven1.org and you'll see a join testnet button. So you can go ahead and test that out. Give us feedback on the product. We'd love to have you join. And then we're obviously doing an incentivized testnet. So people that do join and the more that they interact, there is ways in which they can earn H1 rewards, which I think is drawn a lot of interest from the communities. And we really want to build a robust community that gives us feedback. And we build our products based on what they're looking for. So that's on the Haven1 side. To learn about me, you can follow me on Twitter. So if you search for _Jeffrey Owens, that's my Twitter handle. And then you can also search for Jeff Owens Haven1 on LinkedIn and give me a follow or try to connect.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Yeah, thanks, Jamil. I really appreciate it. It was great to talk with you and really good questions.